The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click Donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Generation by Liturgy, featuring my guest, Greg Fox, on drums. A native of New York, Fox has collaborated with a stylistically varied list of highly regarded artists over the past decade, and he's developed an aesthetic fingerprint that is recognizable whether he's working with others or producing his own work. Greg's approach to drumming exists at the intersection of technical discipline and metaphysical seeking. His latest solo release, Mitral Transmission, is inspired by his studies with his mentor and past guest of this show, Milford Graves. I spoke to Greg in Brooklyn during his residency at Pioneer Works Art Space. And now our conversation with Greg Fox.
So you grew up in Manhattan, right?
I did. Yeah.
What part of town?
Well, my parents got divorced when I was 2, and they lived on either side of Central Park, basically kind of moving up and down. So I've kind of lived...
What do you mean moving up and down?
Well, my dad sort of moved many times within a 10-block radius, and my mom moved a couple times too. So there was a bit of moving around of both households.
So one of them was on the east side, one of them was on the west side.
Yes. Yeah, Central Park was like the net of the tennis court, and I was like the ball.
Ah, okay. You already have analogies ready. Is that how you felt as a kid?
No, I mean,
Did you feel like you were being volleyed around for their amusement?
Definitely not for their amusement. But sometimes, I mean, it's a double-edged sword growing up in 2 households, because on the one hand, there's like a certain lack of consistency that you might benefit from as a kid. But on the other hand, when you see your parents living separately and you experience the different ways they keep their households, you get a bit more perspective, I think, on how you kind of want to be.
Who did you relate to more closely?
Well, I spent more time with my mom, and my mom remarried my stepfather. His name is Mitch. He's an amazing guy, and he had some kids from a previous marriage. So there was like sort of a family unit over there. We were all very close, and I was also, my dad had another son with my stepmom, so there's a family over there too. So who did I relate to more? I think in different ways I related to my mom and dad differently more.
Okay, but you were saying like it was a double-edged sword because you got to see like how the different households were set up.
Well, right. I think, one thing that I've thought about a little bit lately, and this is not any slight against either of them, but I remember when I was very young, my dad encouraging me to like do things for myself when I would be at his house. And some of those things like may have been slightly misguided, like, heating something up in the oven or something like that. I don't know how great of an idea that was. But then again, I think it was good that I was encouraged to do some of those things there that when I was at my mom's house, it would be something I wouldn't have done for myself.
Right.
So that might be one example. But I think more it just has to do with more subtle things, like the way it feels to sit down around the dinner table or the kinds of language people use to talk to each other encouragingly or disparagingly, and the sort of what kind of energy is cultivated in the household. That's more of what I think I think that's more of what affected me in a way that gave me some sort of foresight as to what kind of who I was, in the middle of that.
How did you discover music? Were your parents music fans?
Yeah, so my grandfather was a drummer. My mom's dad played the drums, not professionally, but as a very serious hobby. And he did play gigs. He's a jazz drummer. And my dad listened to a lot of music. I remember being at his house and, Rubber Soul was on a lot. Grateful Dead records were on sometimes. Like, I have some memories of some of that. There was always this kind of lingering knowledge, like Grandpa's a drummer, so I like music. And when I was very little, my mom, sometimes when she was still, I think, if I remember correctly, before she had remarried, she would like lay out pots and pans on the floor and I would bang on them with wooden spoons. And it was like a thing I would do, which I'm sure lots of drummers have as part of their sort of getting into drumming.
And then once she remarried, she didn't allow that shit anymore?
No. I think it was still allowed, but I just remember it being when I was very young. So that was before. My mom remarried when I was, I want to say 8 or 9,
Okay.
so I think it was before then.
Okay.
But actually when I was in 4th grade, so music was something that meant a lot to me from a pretty young age. And it, like my dad had like a Zappa record, and I remember being really attached to Peaches and
Peaches and Regalia?
yeah, well, that track, that composition in particular, but the whole the
Apostrophe?
not that record, the record
Hot
he had-
Rats?
Yeah, exactly, that's the one. Hot Rats was like one of the big early impressions on me. I mean, I had a babysitter who would like pick me up from school, and she would listen to like Nine Inch Nails and The Cure and stuff. She's kind of goth, and I got into that stuff pretty hard. Like my first 2 records that I bought for myself were The Cure, Standing by the Sea, and Strictly Commercial by Frank Zappa.
What other stuff were you into at the time? Like, what did you picture yourself doing when you grew up?
The first thing I ever wanted to do when I grew up, or the first thing I'd say when people asked me, was I said I wanted to be a comedian. I was like really all about that. I thought that was the coolest thing to do.
Really?
Yeah.
So which comedians were you? I'll do the Marc Maron thing. Who were your guys?
My guys, I don't think I had any guys. I just liked, I don't know,
It wasn't
learned.
like you saw Don Rickles on TV and you're like, I want to fucking do that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it was more that just as a kid I learned that a way to get positive attention from my family was to make them laugh, and I did that a lot. And it was just something that it's like one of the first things I ever learned, and I don't know, I think it became a pretty central part of my character. I think it's a lot more muted now than it used to be, but I
never pegged you as a very funny guy.
well, I don't, it's like I said, but I don't know. For some reason, that was
now
just
you
like
have another
what I
way to
wanted
get
do.
attention, too.
Right.
So.
Yeah, right. I don't know, but who knows? I could go into like maybe it had something to do with having, parents being divorced or like wanting to sort of fill some sort
Please
of
them.
Yeah, that, and I don't know. When I was a baby, or a little kid, my family members were I was always making everybody laugh. That was just something I did. So I don't know. Comedian, I don't know. So that's what I wanted to do. And then I guess at a certain point when I started to actually have some semblance of an idea of what it meant to actually have a job and be an adult to some degree, although I still don't know what that really is, I started to think, oh, well, I'm interested in people. I'm interested in like sort of, once I started to get an awareness of social dynamics and things like that, I thought maybe I'd be study psychology or I don't know. But
Did you go to therapy as a kid?
Yeah, I was sent, the whole divorced parents. So I don't know.
Like all through your childhood, basically?
No, on and off. I think I was like, there was a period of time I think it was around 3rd grade. I guess I kind of like discovered existential dread in like 3rd grade.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I started feeling really...
Were your parents religious?
Not really. My folks, I was raised Reformed Jewish. So basically that means we eat bagels, exchange Hanukkah presents, and occasionally go to temple. And I would be expected.
Did you get bar mitzvah?
I did, yeah. And that was basically the last time I went to temple.
It was an insurance policy, kind of, or a cultural thing.
Yeah, well, it was, make grandma happy,
Uh-huh.
kind of thing. I mean, I went to a Jewish elementary school in Manhattan when I was a kid. So it was like more a cultural thing than a religious thing.
My parents were basically agnostic or atheists,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like I discovered existential dread when I was like 6,
Right.
when I was in first grade.
Right.
How did you come to that realization when you were in third grade, and what happened?
I don't know. I kind of got a little depressed, I think. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I don't know if I could put my finger on it. Might have had something to do with being, my family was going through a lot of change at that time on both sides, new step-parents, step-siblings. It all happened relatively quickly. I don't know if I'm dating this exactly accurately, but it feels like that must have had a lot to do with it. And, and nothing bad was happening, but it was just tough for me, I guess. I don't know. I didn't like doing homework. I didn't like my third grade teacher. I thought that I kind of felt like the stuff we were being taught was stupid and I didn't care about it. And yeah, that was like when I stopped caring about putting work into homework. That was the thing. It was like, so I think at a certain point, just sort of linking this back to like being sent to therapy, I think there was a sort of like a call to my parents with like, something's up with your son. He's like, something's up. So I don't know. He's like, I don't know what that call entailed, but it was around then.
Did it help? Therapy?
No, it didn't not when I was a kid and just being shoved into it. I think that might have been an attempt at a sort of preventative medicine on the part of my folks to some degree. Later on in life, it's been something that has helped for sure, but with various things, but not as a kid. I think my folks, I don't know, I think it was my mom and stepdad maybe, there was a certain amount of thinking that stuff to some degree was going on that I would need some sort of outside help with. But I don't know, I don't think I was very open to it at the time, and I kind of resented being sent around. I sort of developed quite a chip on my shoulder at a young age. Well, I didn't start causing trouble or sneaking out or smoking cigarettes or anything, but it was more just, I don't know. I remember kind of at one point pretty young having a sitting on my mom's bed and being like, what is the point? What is the point?
Right.
That kind of question. What is the point? And just not being able to get an answer.
How would
to
you
that.
answer that now?
How would I answer it?
What if you had a nephew or something that was going through the same thing? What advice would you give that person? What
the advice I would give maybe young me or the nephew or the niece would be that, as far as I can gather, because I certainly don't know, but as far as I can gather, and something that helps me is just spending time with and cultivating my relationships with my friends and family, doing the things I like to do that make me happy, sharing those things with other people. What else? I don't know. And, seeking new experiences. I think other than that, what else can you look for? Try to, I certainly wouldn't say figure out the job that can make you live a comfortable life or, I don't know. But I think that those things are the things that bring me peace to some degree, for sure.
When did you get serious about playing drums?
I got really serious about drumming when I got out of high school. I ended up from a series of events not going to college and getting a job at Manny's Music. There was another good friend of mine from high school who ended up, for other reasons, not going to school. And we got an apartment in Bushwick on Broadway in Myrtle. This was 2003. Yeah, 2003 or so. And we had like a very cheap apartment that we split, and I got a job at Manny's, and that was a major turning point for me, drumming wise, because there was a guy who worked there named Guy Licata. And Guy, at the time, was Jojo Mayer's drum tech and had been studying some with Jojo. Guy also plays with Bill Laswell, and he was in Cold Cave for a while. He's done a lot of stuff. And at the time, he kind of, him and a few of the other people who worked there, but mainly Guy kind of took me under his wing. I was the youngest person there, and I was, and I was a drummer, and he would show me stuff on the drums, and it's a weird world, those dudes working at Manny's, Sam Ash, whatever. Back then, it was a lot of people doing drugs, and there was a lot of their vibes and soul-sucking energies. And this dude, I think, kind of helped.
A lot of broken dreams.
Oh, yeah. Sadness. A lot of sadness and anger. And I was super young and fresh, and I think I was the target of some kind of latent bitterness on some of those people's parts.
Of course you were.
So I was pretty naive. But anyway, some of the people who worked there were really amazing, huge, helpful influences on me. And Guy was absolutely the biggest one of all. But really also he just showed me stuff on the drums. He showed me molar technique. He showed me mini molar technique. He showed me the sort of French timpani stuff. He just showed me exercises, and he got me really serious about the pad.
Okay, so then what was your next step?
Practicing all the time. I was playing in a band at the time with some folks I went to high school with. That was sort of a continuation of another high school band, and that band actually being with Hunter from Liturgy. We've been playing music together since high school, since junior high actually. But so this at the time we had a band together. It was me, Hunter, a guy named Tony Gedrich, great bass player, and Ben Greenberg, great guitar player, an old friend. And so we had a band together called Holy Wars that we did for the year that I was in New York after high school. That's what I was doing then. So the other thing is that at Manny's, at the time, Manny's had just been bought by Sam Ash, and they decided to basically continue to run Manny's as though it were Manny's, but secretly it was Sam Ash. And that continued to sort of become a less and less cool thing to be a part of on the working side. The commissions were going down. They wanted us to start wearing a uniform and stuff like that. It just got less and less cool. And people were quitting, and the people who they were hiring sucked. And it just was like, okay, well, I'm not going to keep doing this. So I didn't really know what to do. And I think at the time I just thought, well, if I'm going to go to college, I might as well do it now, because this drumming thing is kind of, I still didn't think it was just going to be what I did. I just thought I'd I also thought I would just be in this, maybe I'll just keep playing in this band I'm in right now, and who knows what's, there was no ambition about it. I was just playing. So I reapplied to, I had gotten into a couple schools the first time around when I applied to college, so I reapplied to a bunch of them, and one of the schools I reapplied to was Bard College, and I didn't even have to reapply. They just said, we can just accept your application. You're still accepted, basically. So that's what I did. I went to school.
How did you like Bard?
I had mixed feelings about it. There were some really amazing aspects of it. It was pretty small. I mean, it was a shock being a native New Yorker and living in here my whole life, then finding myself in a really, really small school upstate. There's just nowhere. At first, it was really exciting, and there was I felt there was a lot of gravity, and I could make friends and meet people, and it was just very cool and fluid. And then at a certain point, there was something that was crippling about that for me, where there was just everywhere you walk, you see people you know, and it being a matter of either making the choice to stop and say hi, to acknowledge every single person you pass by, or not doing that. And I just got very wrapped up in my head about how to handle socially being in such a small fish tank, because my inclination in New York City is whenever you walk around, if you bump into someone stop and say something. But then when you're, constantly always surrounded by people who you kind of sort of know, how do you draw the line? Where do you stop? Where do you not acknowledge everybody who you walk by? I just didn't know how to handle that.
That's how celebrities feel. I mean, ever since I started this podcast, people on the street are just, aren't you the guy from the Trap Set?
Well, they recognize your voice,
Yeah.
your face from your voice.
This episode of The Trap Set is brought to you in part by Colectivo Coffee, handmade coffee since 1993. Check them out online at colectivo.com.
When you left school, what were you thinking? What were your goals?
Still didn't really have any, but when I was my senior year, I started a band with my buddy Tyler, who is the bassist in Liturgy, and that band was called Family of Love, and we did quite a bunch of touring around the U.S., and that band was awesome, and I felt like there was some momentum there, and it was very satisfying musically in a way that I hadn't been so much in the past. And the working relationship I had with Tyler creatively was like really instant and undeniable, and not difficult, especially just as far as getting in the room playing. Things would start to happen, and we would be able to get on the same page quickly about how to write and turn these things into songs, and they were good. It was just a 2-person project, but it was awesome. And via that band, I ended up being in another band called Teeth Mountain because Tyler had an old friend from high school who was in this band based in Baltimore. We did some touring together. They had 3 drummers in the band, and one of them couldn't do the tour, so I drummed with them. It was very free-form, kind of like polyrhythm and drone thing. And that band ended up having major legs, and they asked me to join full-time. So I did a lot of touring with that band. So basically, when I graduated from college, I got in the van. And I got out of the van 3 months later. I didn't have a place to live in New York. That's when, I don't know, by then I was already doing a couple different projects. Dan Deacon had asked Teeth Mountain to be his band, so we were touring. I got to do my first Europe tour, and the first show I ever played in Europe was Primavera, playing with Dan.
Good start.
It's still the biggest show I've ever played.
So that was when Dan started doing his larger scale band.
Yeah.
Like the kind of like Steve Reichy sounding stuff.
I guess. Well, that was like the first time Dan went on tour with like with a band.
Yeah.
The Dan Deacon Ensemble. So I was there. I got asked to be a part of that, and we did a whole lot of touring. I did that for a couple of years after getting out of college, and Teeth Mountain kept going for a couple of years. Family of Love kept going, and then Tyler and I both joined Liturgy, and I was holding down odd jobs, and then I ended up losing all my odd jobs, and music kept me too busy, and
So where are you at right now? What are you doing?
Well, right now, what I'm doing is I'm actually taking a year off from touring for the first time since I left school. I'm doing a lot of teaching in New York, and a little bit on Skype, which is interesting, and the bands that I'd been playing with primarily over the past couple of years, Liturgy, Z's, and Guardian Alien, are all not doing any touring. There's a little bit of one-off trips here and there, but there's no actual tour planned. I have a couple records coming out with new projects, one of which is with Colin Stetson, the reimagining of Goretzky's Third Symphony, and another duo that I did with a modular synth player named Ryan Soper, and there are a couple other things too.
Do you feel fulfilled right now?
No. No, I don't. I mean,
do you want to?
No, definitely not. I mean, I'd like to feel. I mean, I do feel fulfilled in some ways. I feel like I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm increasingly doing what I want to do. So that is in and of itself fulfilling. But
is it as fulfilling as you thought it would be?
It's just the whole thing isn't what I thought it would be, because I originally thought what I thought was that I thought I would be in a band. This is like my fantasy was I'll be in a band.
Right.
The band will be big somehow, and that will be what I do. And then like maybe I'll do a couple bands or something. And to some degree that has been the case, but I don't think that way anymore. I don't think I'm not in the van anymore in my head. Even when I'm, something about the way that works didn't work for me ultimately. And it's been more fulfilling for me to work sort of as an independent operator and be a part of projects, working with collaborations and people, lending my ability or co-creating with people, or being hired to do things.
Do you think you're better at advocating for yourself now?
Yeah.
What are the lessons that you learned?
I'm definitely better at advocating for myself. I'm better at trusting my intuition when it comes to people, and knowing when something just isn't going to work. I think what I've learned is that every relationship, I've learned this really through music. Every relationship has the potential seed in it when it starts of being just the absolute most beautiful flower or tree that could possibly grow, But like every seed has that, but they don't all grow to be the most beautiful, realization of whatever inherent potential there is, to begin with. Mm-hmm. And I've just accepted that. And I think for a long time there was this massive struggle with why isn't this or that the thing that I thought it could be or should be? How is it not the case that that's happening?
How do you feel now on a day-to-day level? Do you still go back to that existential dread, or do you feel like you've kind of gotten beyond it? Learn how to cope with it.
It really vacillates. Sometimes I feel it, but it's like a processing. It's not just this sort of void. It's more gears turning. And then other times I feel like I'm just, on the other side of that mirror, and I'm actually feeling quite elated. So I'd hesitate to say, I don't think I'm manic or anything, but it's more just a sort of seeing both sides of the coin all the time.
Yeah.
And it's when you're younger, I definitely had some sort of like prolonged periods of feeling pretty blissful about everything. But I think at a certain point, yeah, I did. I mean,
as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, when I was living before I went to school, I was like feeling pretty good about life in general, having nothing to do with me or what I was doing. It was just more about enjoying being here. And when I was in school, there, especially at the beginning, it was like really expansive, explosive, beautiful, happy feeling. But I think a lot of that, I don't know, when all the possibilities are out there, of what you could do or what your life could be or the different roads you could take, as somebody said to me recently, the waveform hasn't collapsed yet, so you can feel all this. It starts to get more challenging when you start to zero in, you have to narrow it to a certain degree to propel things forward. And then that's when you start to encounter, at a certain point, the water hits the rock and it has to build up before it overcomes the rock again. So I'm not always the most patient person. Sometimes that feeling of waiting for the water to overcome the rock can be like very difficult for me. But then sometimes I realize that that's what's happening and I accept it and it's fine.
So you feel like there's some sort of external force propelling you past the rock?
Yeah.
How much agency do you think you have in your own life?
That's a good question. I think ultimately a fair amount. But then again, I also think that everything kind of I do think that everything happens for a reason. I think that,
Why do you think that?
Why? Because I think that our perception of time is not what time actually is. And so I think that we see things as being,
linear.
Yeah, and they're not, I don't think. And So because of that, I think that there is a certain amount. I don't want to say it's predetermination, because that works within the concept of understanding time to be linear. It's not pre or post determination or whatever. It's more about. I think it's just simultaneous. There's something simultaneous about it, and so to that end, I think there can be a lot of agency in giving up agency. There can be a lot of agency in relaxing into the tide or the current. But then again, the flip of that is, you can just sort of relax into the lazy river ride and let the current take you where it goes, or you can go where you want to go, and make choices about that. I just don't know. I totally do not. I really just don't know. I wouldn't purport to. But you grasp for knowing to make yourself feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Greg Fox, thanks so much.
Oh, thanks, Joe.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.